Okay, so we've come here today to start off a little kind of like a red table talk, and we're going to be discussing matters around family court. We've got here today Georgia, Susanna, Helen, Charlotte and myself, Victoria, and we're going to be discussing family court and the situations within family court. There's obviously been a lot in the media at the minute about family court. What happened to bring it to the media's attention was there were some campaigners and MPs. Louise Haigh MP with Sammy Woodhouse brought the bill into Parliament for an independent investigation into family court and looking at the rights of rapists in a view of having contact with their children. The bill wasn't passed and there wasn't an independent investigation, but what the Ministry of Justice said was that there would be a review of the family courts, and that would be a 3-month review. Within that, there was several judges, Women's Aid, I think Isabel Trowler, and there was quite a few other people on the panel. So the family court review took a little bit more than 3 months. It took 13 months. But it has come out in June 2020, and it's basically just saying what everyone has been saying, that children have been placed in unsafe contact orders, and sometimes when the mum, usually it's the mum, sometimes it can be the dad, reports abuse, so the child comes and it discloses abuse, then the chances are that that child could be removed from the mum and could be placed with the perpetrator of the abuse. We're now campaigning, myself and Charlotte have a campaign called #Justice for Family Court Children, and what we're doing with that campaign is we're asking Parliament to look at these cases where children have been placed in unsafe contact orders and children that have been removed from the safe parent and placed with the perpetrator. So what we want to do is obviously look at them orders and find some kind of redress so that these children can be safe, because it's no good doing the review and saying, yeah, you know, there is a problem, there was a problem, we're going to sort the problem, but then leaving some of the children with these orders that are unsafe. So that's what we're asking for. So what I thought, if we just go around the room and maybe introduce ourselves and let everyone know a little bit about ourselves, then we can discuss what we feel about the review, what we feel about family court, and how we hope that we can make a little bit of change in the family court, hopefully as soon as possible.
So I'm Georgia, I'm currently 16 years old. I am a pioneer for Safe Lives, and I started my work after my mother's murder by my stepfather, and that was through a conference which was the Stand Up to Domestic Abuse conference, which was held at Celtic Manor in South Wales. And I experienced the family courts when I was young. That was with my mother and my biological father, and I also experienced social services and the family courts after my mother's murder.
Yeah, I'm Charlotte Budd. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. My husband was abusive emotionally and mentally, and he was physically violent, and I left. I have experienced family court whilst trying to protect my daughter, and then I've also come across hundreds of other horrific experiences in family court, and it really drove me to want to try and do something to make a change, which is when obviously I met Victoria and we started the campaign Justice for FC Children. And we're going to be running a fundraiser where I'll be trekking at Ben Nevis in October to raise money and also to raise awareness, and to obviously spread the word for the campaign.
I'm Susanna. I'm also a survivor of domestic abuse. I have 6 children, and one of them was given by the family courts to the perpetrator father, who was abusive to my other children and myself. He was given an order when she was 5 months old. He took her out of my care. for no apparent reason, but he was an abuser. I believe it was because he was controlling and coercive, and it wasn't recognised by the family courts. I couldn't get legal aid. I couldn't afford a solicitor. I was legally representing myself. Obviously, that was an unfair trial and broke my human rights. I've never got over it. I was helped by an organisation called Legal Action for Women, who are absolutely amazing. I did a protest outside the family courts with them in London. They regularly do it every month. And since then, they have supported me. They got me a barrister, cheap and affordable. And we basically took the case back to court. I now have regular contact with my daughter. So I missed the first 18 months properly of her life, which was really hard for my other children who live with me in Devon. I now travel 4 hours each way to go and collect her. And I have 2 children with additional needs. So that's hard, taking us all in the car to go and get her. However, she loves her time down here. She has an absolutely lovely time, and I finally am able to make a relationship or have a relationship with her, and it is amazing. But I will never get over of what's happened. I missed her first birthday, I missed her first Christmas, and he still controls me now through contact. That's why I'm fighting to change the family court system. I've just got a first in my degree at Plymouth University, and I wrote my dissertation regarding domestic abuse on women and children in the family courts.
I think that is a major issue, is the control post separation through the family courts. Things like that, missing birthdays and Christmas and Mother's Day and all them kind of things, absolutely horrific, and something that, you know, they're just not recognizing of the trauma that they're putting these children through when these children grow up and they find out that they've missed out so much. And the courts are just continuing this abuse, and they don't see it as abuse. They see it as making sure that it's basically contact at all costs, whatever trauma they're going to put it through.
Hi, I'm Helen. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, and I've gone on to become a volunteer for Women's Aid delivering the Freedom Programme, which I did for 3 years. I'm now trustee for a local sexual abuse and assault service, campaigning for to end abuse. My experience was, well, I was in a domestic abuse relationship. It was abusive emotionally and physically. I left my partner in 2006, and it was the post breakup that made it worse than anything. The control, the fear, but I had the most horrific experiences of family court. But finally I was taken seriously and my case did go to trial. My ex was sentenced, and whilst it was a non-custodial sentence, it has kept him away from us. The restraining order, and not allowed to come to the area that I live. So I'm doing this to raise awareness. I've worked with many women who have had the most awful experiences of family court, where we're treated as criminals, and it's just the most terrific experience.
Yeah, I think that's another issue is we go into family court kind of blindly assuming that we're going to get justice, and that's what it's there for. It's family court after families, and what tends to happen is they rip families apart and there's no justice. Obviously we now have the family court review, because a lot of people have said it's anecdotal evidence. Well, 21 dead children is not anecdotal evidence. These children have died because of wrong decisions made in the family court system. And I mean, I'm in court at the minute, so I can't really speak too much about my case, but definitely at the minute, the family court are not accepting any responsibility for their actions. They are not seeing anything that they have done wrong. And I think I've just seen Jackie Tioto's response, the head of Cafcass, and I haven't read Cafcass's response, but I have read Jackie Tioto's response to Louise Tickle's piece, where basically she's saying it's not helpful to speak about Cafcass in a negative light. I'm not going to quote her, but that's the kind of how she's saying it. But she's saying that Louise Tickle's piece is not balanced, and Louise Tickle says that Cafcass have twisted priorities. So Cafcass are court advisors, and they are like the social workers for the court. Now, most women's experience seems to be that they come for maybe half an hour to an hour and meet the child, and then they decide for like a year or 2 years what's going to happen for that child. I know I've even heard one story where an actual social worker split up with her husband, and the Cafcass officer went round for half an hour and met the mum and the children and decided that those children should be taken off that social worker and given to the father literally within a half an hour meeting, and that's it. There's no way within half an hour or to an hour you can decide a child's life, and that seems to be the experience that a lot of women, I'm going to speak about women because we're women in this group, and it does tend to normally affect women, but obviously I am going to be neutral in this situation and say it does happen to men as well. There are a lot of good dads that just do go to family court just to get contact, and obviously we know that domestic abuse is usually a gendered crime. In my situation, my ex-partner is female, so I generally tend not to try and gender it because it can happen to anyone. But yeah, Cafcass, Georgia, do you want to start off with your views or experiences, or how do you feel about Cafcass?
Basically, yeah, the whole sort of one meeting and they sort of decide your life. I sort of experienced that, and the questions that they asked. This is when I was younger. I was probably about 5, maybe a bit older, and probably 4 or 5. And the questions that they asked were sort of very closed-end questions, and it was, you want to see your daddy, don't you? Instead of, would you like to see your dad? And they sort of pushed you into a certain into an answer, and also sort of convince you that everything's going to be fine and good, and a lot of the time it's not. And for me, my dad was awarded contact. Fortunately, I didn't have to go and live with him, but he was awarded supervised visits to start with, and as I got older, I was allowed to go to his house and things. But yeah, and I haven't seen him now for about 6 or 7 years because Cafcass were wrong. He wasn't a good dad like they said he would be. And yeah, and the same with social services. Really, they just thought my dad was amazing. My mum was only killed 2 years ago, so this is really recent for me. And yeah, they just sort of treated me like I was about 10 years old, and I had no sort of idea of what I wanted in my life. I was like, I am, I have a head on my shoulders. I am quite capable of deciding where I want to live, and I know that I don't want to live with my dad. And why would you even make me think about living with my dad when I haven't seen him for however long? It just didn't really make sense to me at all.
I think, Georgia, you've picked up on a great point there. I mean, the big thing that Cafcass advertise is the voice of the child, and that is something that they completely ignore. I can't really speak about my own circumstances, but at the minute it's absolutely horrific. There is a child screaming out and begging, and the voice of the child is completely ignored.
Can I just say something? Sorry, can I just say something about that?
Yeah.
I totally agree, and it's not just about the subject child; it's about the non-subject child as well. Because obviously, that if you have other children, they need to say whether how they're feeling, how it's affecting them, and whether they want to have that other child removed. Because we need to remember that we live in a controversial world, and not everyone stays with the same partner. So if there is more than one father and the father is the abuser, the non-subject children, in my case, certainly were not asked by CAFCASS or any social workers, and they didn't have a voice, which affect, against the human rights, again, Article 9, and they weren't asked, and they have been absolutely affected by not seeing their sister, and now we're financially affected because every 3 weeks it's costing £120 of fuel money to go and get my daughter, to bring her back to Devon for just 2 nights.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that CAFCASS don't recognise is family ties, because again, I can't really give much of an example from my situation, but there's a heartbroken family, a huge heartbroken family. There's children, there's cousins, there's half cousins, there's quarter cousins, there's a whole family that's heartbroken because they don't understand. Here's me, who I haven't really given much of a background about myself, but I was a nanny for MPs and for ministers and for psychologists, psychiatrists, very high up psychiatrists, and lots of other people, a few people in the music industry. And I've got excellent references, and looked after children pretty much all my life. As soon as I could start babysitting, age 14, looked after very prominent people's children in the neighbourhood as well. And then nobody understands why my child was removed, because they see me as brilliant with children. So I think what happens is it affects the children because they just don't understand. And even if there is a court order that says whatever it says because of the terrible decisions they make in family court, nobody can understand, and I know Susanna's story, but I also know another story, and this is again what I don't understand. I think this is something that the public needs to be aware of, is I think the public thinks there's no smoke without fire, and they think that if a child is removed from a mum, there must be a reason. But I've seen, for example, in Susanna's case, Susanna has 5 of her children, but 1 removed. So how can you abuse 1 but not the other 5? And I know another lady who has 1 of her children but had 5 removed to the father because she had 5 with 1. And they say, oh, but they blame the mom, and they say it's your fault because you can't get on with the dad, but you can get on with the other dads, or so why can you keep 1 child and not the other 5, or 5 and not 1? None of it makes sense. And for example, with myself, I can go to London and make £4,000 a month, looking after anybody else's child or anybody else's child in the world, but I can't look after my own child. None of it makes sense. But what I wanted to say as well is, if anybody just wants to chat now, it doesn't have to be so, anyone can just come in. But I don't know if did you want to say anything else about CAFCASS, Susanna?
I would just like to say that when I initially was involved in CAFCASS because of the court case, they didn't actually see me in person. They actually, because the father took the child, so the court proceeding where the child lives, so that was in Coventry, I'm Devon. So they didn't see me face to face. They didn't see me with my child. And in fact, they just did a 30-minute consultation over the phone. So they didn't even see what I looked like.
Yeah.
And that was how they made their decision.
Yeah. I mean, they should be coming and spending time with you and your child, spending time with the family, spending time, because what happens, I don't know about anybody else, but the perpetrator of abuse can say absolutely anything, completely unevidenced. They can make up anything, and what I found is CAFCASS just believe them. They don't need any facts, they don't need any evidence, they'll just believe them. But whereas when you come with your facts and the evidence, they don't want to see it at all. They just want contact at all costs, and this has been the problem, and this is what has been evidenced in the family court review, that contact at all costs is put above the children's rights, the victims' rights. Helen, what do you feel about CAFCASS? Did you have CAFCASS?
I did. I totally agree. I didn't have as bad an experience. It was horrific, don't get me wrong. I was really nervous and I think I was treated really badly. There's no kind of, they must understand that it's quite frightening for parents to go to a CAFCASS meeting, and yet they were so cold. And then I was told to wait outside whilst they spoke to the children. So again, they must have had only half an hour. And they wrote there, it was in my favour, pick up the issues with their father. However, their recommendation was that we both did a parenting course. Well, I didn't feel I needed one, and actually it was meant to be compulsory. I did it, but he didn't, but there was no action to make him do it. But I don't understand how a decision for anybody can be made on these meetings, and I think it's a really valid point to pick up, that they do need to spend more time with the family to understand the dynamics. So yeah.
Yeah, Charlotte, how about you?
Yeah, I 100% agree. A half an hour is certainly not enough time to make any type of assessment on a child, parent, or the situation, especially when it's such a huge decisions that are being made and that's going to affect a child's life potentially forever. The other thing that I'm always curious of is exactly what makes a CAFCASS officer, what qualifications do CAFCASS officers actually need? Whether they I always fail to kind of understand is who are they and how they get this job, and why are they doing that job and making such kind of barbaric decisions. And it really sort of amazes when you start to research this stuff that they don't seem to have any real education on domestic abuse, and the wide range of domestic abuse, and the fact that child, when they witness that, and even when it's mental, emotional, coercive control. And there's so many studies out there, and so much has been proven about abuse and childhood trauma and all of that stuff, and yet family court and CAFCASS don't seem to take any of that into consideration whatsoever. And like you said, they don't seem to take evidence into consideration. They tend to just go by what the perpetrator says, and contact at all cost, and that is kind of like a Russian roulette.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think.
I just think it shows that the courts are I think it just shows that the courts are gendered. You know, it's patriarchy all the way, and this is what we need to change. The mindset of that we're just moaning, women are moaning about things. You know, we should just be getting on with it and looking after our children, and we're just picking up defence. When actually we've been mentally abused, physically abused, sexually abused by these perpetrators, and yet they can not only groom us, because they did, they groom society, they groom professionals, and that is a massive problem.
What I found is they don't seem to take into account patterns of behaviour. So they will just look, you know, we've all heard it's historic, as if they've changed, and they literally can change overnight when they leave you. So they can have had a history of abuse outside of your relationship, inside of your relationship, to the child, and then all of a sudden they leave the relationship with you and they're a perfect angel and they'll be a perfect parent. And we all know that that's not the case. And obviously what I found is CAFCASS definitely ignore patterns of behavior. So things like there's obviously with control, there's stalking, there's cyber stalking, there's just the games they play. And I think CAFCASS and social workers from children's services, they tend to have blinkers on, and they tend to go, all I can see is this child is going to have a relationship with this person or going to live with this person, and you're the problem, and we don't see anything they do. So that person can literally do whatever they like, and that's scary. And that's one thing that was brought up in the family court review, is that basically, and this is very scary thought, that once a court order says that that person is not an abuser, so they have no findings because they literally ignore all the evidence, you know, one thing to say, obviously, you know, in criminal court they will go on facts and evidence, but in family court they just go on opinions, not facts and evidence. So what happens is then if there's a court order that says that person is safe, that is it for life. No one will ever look at them again, not the police, not anyone. They will not go against a judge's decision. So if that perpetrator who has that child or has unsafe contact with that child does anything, that person is protected, and that's a very worrying situation. And it's one thing I was going to say was also in the family court review, it seems to recommend 4 different kinds of training for CAFCAS. And I think most of us will have heard, they will say things to us like, oh, your views are entrenched, like you can't get out of your mindset that this child is abused or you've been abused, therefore, you know, you're the parent with the problem. But what I found is their views are entrenched. They cannot, it's like a kind of cult mindset where they can't think differently. And I don't know whether any amount of training is going to change their views, because I don't think just putting them on a course is going to make them accept that they're putting these children in. Even the evidence of the children that have died still doesn't seem to make them want to change the fact that these children will have contact whatever these perpetrators have done. Go on, Helen, sorry.
There's still a conception that both parents need to be involved, rather than one healthy parent. They have the attitude that dad must be in life or other parent must be in their lives, and that, as we know, is not the case. So until that changes, that we, you know, that judges, whoever, understand that a good parent, there only needs to be one, and it doesn't have to be that the other parent is involved. So that's what I came across I went to family court and other court 4 times, and it was only the judge for my child that was understanding. All the others were not. It was all about having the father in place because it was better to have 2 parents. But we know that's not true.
Yeah, I think there's another couple of things that have come up from the review that I've got serious concerns about, and I'm quite happy that I've got this platform to voice them. I have voiced them to a couple of contacts that I have that are working with the Ministry of Justice, but I'm just going to write them down so I remember. S91s and the presumption of contact, these are the 2 things that I've got serious concerns about. And the reason being, and I think this might be good for Georgia, maybe we can have a discussion about it, because I know that you're working with Safe Lives.
Yeah.
Whenever there's anything that is put into the Ministry of Justice as a recommendation for the family court, I think what they need to do is look at the fact that this can be tested onto the victim. So for example, S91s, they're basically a court order that says that the parent can't go back to court to get contact with their child or to change anything about the contact order. Basically, they can ban you from court for however long, up to 3 years usually. So what they're supposed to happen is, what they want to do is make them easier to get. That's what the family court review wants. But the problem is with the S91s is they're using them against the victim. So they are removing the child from the victim to the perpetrator, and then putting these bans on predominantly the mums to say, leave the child and the perpetrator alone, basically.
I had that.
Yeah.
I've got one of those for 3 years.
Yeah, I see it time and time again. They're not being used in the way that they should be used on the perpetrator to stop them post-separation controlling the victim and the child. That's what their intention of the family court review is good, but the problem is they can use it on the victim. And then the other thing is presumption of contact. This concerns me as well, for the mums that have lost their children basically because of the horrific decisions made. Presumption of contact, again, I think they're doing this in a good way. They want to say that basically there shouldn't be contact for children with domestic abusers, with rapists, with paedophiles, with potential murderers, and that's right. But I think they will use this again against the victim, and say, because this mum will emotionally abuse the child because they can't accept that this abuser's not going to abuse the child because the child is telling you they're abusing them, then they need to stop the contact with the safe parent. So I think the presumption of contact and the S91s they're going to use against the victim instead of their intentional use, which is against the perpetrator. Does anybody have any thoughts, extra thoughts on that?
About the presumption of contact, about having as one safe parent rather than necessarily two. And again, there have been studies on this for years and years and years, that the most important thing for a child is stability and care, rather than having a parent who is unstable. We know that childhood trauma is linked to all sorts of mental health issues into adult life. So again, it really baffles me as to where they get their information from, and why these studies aren't used in family court and CAFCASS more often.
Yeah, I think that is. Go on, Helen.
Well, you know, they're not trained. We know that they don't have the training, and the sort of training they do isn't intense enough for them to understand. But these are indoctrined views. These are you know, and I don't know about anyone else, but all of my judges have been pretty old. Now, I'm not an ageist, but they haven't sort of changed their opinions of their opinions maybe in the 70s or 80s. And let's face it, you know, rape in marriage was legal until 1991, I think. So if you've got people with those sort of attitudes, how is that going to change for loving parents and stable parents that can look after their children when you're dealing with those dudes?
Yeah, one thing I was going to say, I'll pick up on that, because one thing that I think has been found from looking into the family court is that a judge only has to have domestic abuse training at the beginning of them becoming a judge. So, like you said, if they become a judge in 1971, that would be the last time that they had domestic abuse training. I think with, you know, obviously Louise Haig's brought that up in Parliament quite a lot about, you know, these judges being unfit for practice. And I've read more than half of the family court review, but I need to get to the recommendation stage. But I haven't so far seen any recommendations of judges domestic abuse training, so that's concerning.
Yeah.
Views on judges, what does that, well, I know that some people have magistrates, but I think most people tend to have judges. What does everyone think of the judges' attitudes towards, you don't have to say specifically in your cases, but judges' attitudes to domestic abuse and judges' attitudes to Georgia, did you have to be in court much?
So no, funnily enough, actually, my nan and granddad, because my nan and granddad have a child arrangement order, so they get to look after me, and they had to go to court to sort of fight my dad over that, and I actually asked, you know, can I please go to this, you know, court hearing? I really want to be there, considering, you know, it's all about what I want, and what's best for me. So I was like, oh, okay, you know, can I go then? And they went, oh, well, children don't normally go to those kind of things. And I was like, hang on a minute. So you're going to have a hearing about what I want and what I feel I need without A, even asking me, and B, even letting me be there. Okay. But they were pressuring me to see my dad so much that, you know, I in the end, I gave in and went to see him because they pressured me so much, and I felt guilt for doing it. And the things they said, oh, well, he really wants to see you, you know, he's changed, he's this, that, and the other. Yeah, what makes sense to me was that, you know, even after my mum died, he never once, you know, said, can I do anything for you? Do you need any money? Do you need anything? You know, I'm here for you. It's not working. For me, you know, they were asking me like 2 weeks after my mum had been, bearing in mind I was present at my mum's murder as well, so I was completely traumatized. They were like, so where do you want to go and live then? Like, hello, I have no idea what I want for breakfast, so, you know, never mind, you know, never mind where I want to live and what I'm going to do in my future. You know, I'd just gone 14 at the time, so, you know, and I was mature for my age anyway, but seriously, like, they just they had no regard for the fact that I'd witnessed what I'd witnessed. You know, I was at school, and the stupid thing was, you know, I went back straight. My mum was killed on the Friday night, and I was in school Monday morning. You know, I went straight back to school because that was the only normal part of my life that I had left, and I was like, that's it. I just need to keep hold of that. And you know, social services, they'd come into school, pull me out of my lessons for meetings, and say, you need to be in lesson more. And I'm like, you've just pulled me out of a lesson to tell me I need to be in lesson more. Surely that's a little bit contradictory, you know? And then they'd come in and they'd scrutinise my report, saying, well, you're not doing well enough at school. You know, bearing in mind, this is like just a couple of months after my mum died. I was like, I'm still getting A's and B's. You know, what is the problem here? You know, why are you telling me off when I'm doing incredibly well, considering what I've just been through? And it's just ridiculous. And they used to send me these stupid little questionnaires, and you know, my doctor had already signed me off as Gaelic competent, so you know, I was able to fortunately I was able to advocate for myself more than a lot of younger kids are able to. But yeah, they used to send me these questionnaires, and it'd be, what's your favorite subject at school, what do you like to do at home? I'm like, I'm not 10. You know, you know, you don't have to treat me like a child. But I think that's part of the problem. They have their protocol, which is a lot of box ticking, unfortunately, a ridiculous amount of box ticking. I was asked the same questions about 100 times. And the problem is, no one's life is protocol. You can't fit people into a protocol. And I felt like I was treated like a criminal, to be honest. You know, I had to like clock in and clock out. If I went to see my friends, I had to send my social worker my friends' parents' phone numbers and their address so that they could like DBS check them while I was at their house. I was like, these are people I've known since I was born. I'm not going to do that. I know they're safe. And it got to the point where, you know, I didn't go out anymore because I just didn't want to comply with the rules, because I just, you know, I was stalked. Me and my mum were stalked by my stepdad. So, and I still felt like I was being stalked, and I was like, I just want to go somewhere without someone knowing where I am, you know, that like someone professional knowing where I am for 5 minutes, because I just need some breathing space. You know, it just, it was a nightmare. Social services were the worst thing about it all. And you know, the thing is with me, I had police interviews, I was getting escorted here, there and everywhere, you know, and I had social services on top of it, which just made the whole situation worse. And you know, they put me and my nan and granddad and my uncle in, you know, for a family conference meeting. They put us all together in a room and kind of just said, right, go for it. And it's like, well, don't, you know, we were all really stressed. I wasn't seeing my nan and granddad at that point, and it just ended up leading to a massive argument. And that was 2 years ago, and I've only just started speaking to my uncle since then because of things that were said in that meeting, because everyone was traumatized and everyone was upset, so things were said that shouldn't have been said. You know, and that's the issue. You know, they've made my relationship with my nan and granddad worse because of, you know, the things that they've done. And they treated my nan and granddad like they didn't even know me. You know, my nan and granddad still had to go for the medical tests, they still had to be DBS checked. It's like, I've practically lived with these people my whole life. You know, my nan and granddad, you know, we used to go and see them every night because that was our escape from the abuse. So, you know, my nan and granddad have raised me since I was a little kid. You know, I used to call them when things were going on at home when I was little and say, can you please come help us out? You know, I'm so close to them. And they were treated like they were absolutely nobody to me. And it's like, well, that doesn't, but my dad was treated like he'd looked after me my whole life. You know, unfortunately, school didn't want to, but they kind of had to comply to it in a way. You know, they were like, well, we're going to have to start sending your dad your school reports and stuff, and you know, all the parents' emails and letters. I was like, my dad doesn't have anything to do with me. He's never once been interested in what I've done in my life. You know, why does that need to start now? You've never had to do it before. And they were like, well, we didn't know your dad had da. I was like, well, that doesn't matter. I don't see him, so why on earth is he entitled to know everything that I do in my life? You know?
Well, I think you've picked up on a lot of things that we're probably as mums, you know, feeling as well, because like I am shouting and shouting and shouting to raise my child's voice and nobody's listening. And it's exactly like what you say. we've got this extended family, we've got grandparents, we've got aunties, we've got cousins, and they're begging to see my child, and my child's begging to see that, and this voice of the child is so important. And you're kind of proving what we're saying is like, you know, the children want to be with their family, they want a voice, they want to know, they want to be part of the process. And we should be listening to the children. And the fact that, you know, they're saying children lie and children make things up, well, I think most of our experiences is more that the perpetrator lies and makes things up, the CAFCASS officers lie and make things up, and the social workers lie and make things up. And the fact is, usually the child is the one that is being honest and open and will just speak like a child speaks.
Because they're told to trust these people. You know, it's like even with teachers, a kid might not quite trust the teacher if they're going through abuse, because obviously, you know, the perpetrator say, no, if you tell someone I'm going to do this, 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 and this, you know. But then when they think they're getting, it's like with police officers, you know, and stuff like that. If they think they're getting out of the situation, they think that they're safe, and then they think, oh, I can tell this person everything because they're promising me that, you know, this won't happen, such and such won't happen to me, and I won't have to see them. But then they spill all, and then that person completely like breaks their trust and goes, and, you know, they end up having the opposite result to what they thought they were going to get. And then they just, and then unfortunately as well, in some situations, you know, the perpetrator finds out what the kid has said, and that can land the kid in more trouble. And then you wonder why these kids are getting murdered.
Yeah.
Not rocket science.
Yeah, exactly. Go on, Helen.
I think we could have a bigger discussion, maybe the next Zoom call, around social workers. They're horrific, and they're another organisation or service that are not held to account. It's not in the interest of the mum. I've got horrific stories of social workers. I think they're appalling. And again, in terms of training, I know that in their degrees, they don't do intense training on domestic abuse. In Bucks, I do work at the council, and now as part of the DVA network, there is 2 days champion training, and the council have spearheaded that social workers attend this. And I can't say if it's helped or not, but it certainly can't not help. And this is where the training of judges, social workers, everyone in this spectrum, they need to have the training to understand, because not just the children are going through trauma, but the parent, the victim, is going through a trauma and being victimised all the way through by every service, by the police, by the judges, the social workers, CAFCASS. And then we're told that we have mental health issues, or we have anxiety. Well, it's not surprising, is it, when we're going through all of this again, but with those services, and it goes against us.
I mean, it's constant. It is absolutely constant when you're going through. There's no let up with the pressure that they put on you. And one thing I wanted to pick up on there is, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a voice, and I have had a voice with a few commissioners. And one thing, I'm not going to speak specifically about what they speak about, but a lot of it is join up. And the problems we have is that the separated authorities all have different ideas, and that's definitely one thing that I find is you can get advice off a CAFCASS officer, and they can say you should be doing this, you should be doing that, and then a social worker from Children's Services will pick something up and say, no, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing this. So then you go back to that, and then they get annoyed with you because you're doing what they say, and they get annoyed with you because you're doing what they say, and then you don't know what to do, and then they kind of twist it and go, oh, but you're not taking my advice, and then they go, you're not taking my advice, and then you don't know what to do. One thing I did find, and one thing that I have put forward to my contacts who are working with the Ministry of Justice and the family court situation, is that there needs to be a join up in the training. So it's okay maybe saying that these CAFCASS officers are going to have these 4 different kinds of domestic abuse training, but this needs to be passed on to judges, solicitors, even solicitors. The solicitors are absolutely horrific in family court, and it's all about women, and they really do not care about the children at all. They will just play any game to make the situation worse, to drag it out for longer, because the longer you're in court, the more money they're making. So they really do not care about, you know, how safe your child is or what happens to your child or how traumatized it is. They don't care. The longer they keep you fighting in court, the more money they're going to be making. The one thing I think is, if they're going to do a certain amount of training with CAFCASS officers, then that same training needs to be done with judges, needs to be done with children's services social
Yeah.
workers, that they all are on the same page, because
I agree.
otherwise the parents and the children are not going to know which advice to take and what they should be doing. And that's definitely, and then also contact workers as well, contact workers in contact centres. And also, if they're bringing in court-appointed psychologists or anyone, they all need to have the same training, because otherwise you're getting different advice from different people and you don't know which way to go and what to do. And obviously you want to do as much as you can to help the situation, but when you're getting all this different kind of advice, you know what you can do. What I was going to say was, another thing we can do today is, obviously what I'm hoping is to make this a little bit bigger and to invite more people from different areas, maybe some of the campaigners, maybe some of the commissioners, if they'll come on and chat with us, because I think the voice of experience and lived experience is the most important thing. I think it's amazing that these campaigners and these MPs and these ministers and commissioners are helping us to get our points across. But I think, you know, I think sometimes our voices get stifled, especially now the reviews come out. It's brilliant that it's come out, and you know, we're kind of, you know, the truth has come out that what we're saying is true. But the problem is now is they're going to be making decisions on how things should change. But as I say, like the S91s and the presumption of contact, they can turn that around on the victim. I think the voice of lived experience still needs to be, we still need to get louder. And obviously the people who still have unsafe contact orders, whose children are still living with the perpetrators, I think there needs to be some kind of redress on them issues. I'm not sure how we go about that. I've definitely not so far had any contact with anybody in power to address those issues, which is quite upsetting, given the fact that I've campaigned so hard, given the fact that I have risked my liberty and still risk my liberty, you know, but obviously nothing's going to change unless people stand up and fight for change, which obviously we're doing. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming today and chatting about family court, and I'm hoping to do this on a regular session, and I'd like to invite more people. So there's going to be some people that I'm going to invite, and we're going to try and get some other subjects spoke about. I think next time we're going to speak about legal aid and being a litigant in person in family court, and also about solicitors and whether they help or whether they worse. And then another subject we want to speak about is special measures that's been brought up in the Domestic Abuse Bill and the Family Court Review, about screens, waiting rooms, exit entrances and cross-examination. So these are the subjects we're going to talk about next time. If anybody would like to join us, our social media, if you want to follow us, my Twitter is at Victoria_Hudson, HUDSON. I've also got a Facebook page, which is called www.facebook.com/getmhome. So they're the two platforms that you can follow me on. We will be putting this on, this will be on YouTube as well. I have got a channel there that you can follow. So the campaign that we have at the minute is called #Justice for Family Court Children. So #Justice for FC Children. So you can follow that hashtag too, and you can put it in your tweets. This campaign basically is to get redress on unsafe contact orders and any children that have been removed from the safe parent to be returned to the safe parent. Charlotte is going to be walking up Ben Nevis, trekking up Ben Nevis, which is I hear 7 to 9 hour trek. And if you want, I'll sit at the bottom of the mountain and with a flask of tea and cake and take pictures of her leaving and coming. If that's what you want, that's what I'll do. And Charlotte is raising money for Rachel Williams' charity, Stand Up to Domestic Abuse. Charlotte, do you want to say your Twitter pages? And
yeah, my Twitter page is @CharlotteBudd, and you can also follow me on Facebook, which is also under Charlotte Budd. And again, I'm involved with the hashtag Justice for FC Children, so you can follow all of that.